Tonight, several investigators back at Nancy Guthrie's property, some standing in that doorway where the masked man showed up, others in the backyard taking photos and appearing to analyze something on the sliding glass door. The FBI did not say what prompted this activity, but two law enforcement sources say officials are working on handing the home back over to the family.
FBI found a link. Not a theory. Not a tip from a stranger on the internet. A link. A forensic, documented, traceable connection between the evidence recovered at Nancy Guthrie's home and a specific type of person. And when Dr. Gary Brucato sat down and walked through exactly what that link means, what it tells investigators about who planned this, who executed this, and who is still out there, the picture that emerged was not what most people following this case expected. It was worse. That is where this story begins. Not with the disappearance. Not with the headlines. With the link the FBI found. And with what Dr. Brucato said happens next.
Outside Nancy's home, signs of hope.
This memorial here continues to grow. In addition to the yellow flowers, there's a number of hand-painted signs, and even back here, these mahjong tiles. That's one of Nancy's favorite hobbies.
Amid the outpouring of love, the intense public interest in this case has at times led to false accusations.
Nancy Ellen Long Guthrie was 84 years old. 5 feet tall. A widow who raised 3 children largely on her own after her husband died in a mining accident in Mexico. She had lived in the same house in the Catalina foothills neighborhood of Tucson, Arizona for more than 50 years. Same street. Same garden. Same church pew every Sunday. She was not someone who drew attention to herself. She was someone who had quietly built a life and held onto it with both hands for 8 decades. She had a pacemaker. She required daily medication. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nano said it publicly, on camera, without hesitation. Nancy could not walk 50 yards under normal conditions without difficulty. Half a football field. That was the limit of what her body could manage. On the evening of January 31st, she had dinner with her daughter Annie and Annie's husband, Tommaso Cayan, an Italian-born musician. The meal was routine. Warm. There was nothing about that evening that signaled what was coming. At 9:48 that night, Tommaso drove her home. He walked her to the front door. He confirmed she went inside. He got back in his car and drove away. The house went quiet. Then the night turned. At 1:47 in the morning, the doorbell camera at Nancy's home captured a figure standing on her front porch. Masked. Armed. Nitrile gloves on both hands. A small backpack. This figure did not rush. Did not look around nervously. Did not hesitate. It stood there with a calm that trained investigators noticed immediately, reached over, and covered the camera lens with foliage taken from a potted plant sitting right there on the porch. At that exact same moment, Nancy's pacemaker registered a cardiac spike. Her heart surged. The device recorded it, time-stamped it, documented it. Her body was bearing witness when nothing else could. At 2:28 in the morning, the pacemaker signal dropped. The wireless connection to her bedside monitoring unit went silent. No more data. No more heartbeat. Just silence. Hi viewers. Nancy's pacemaker recorded the exact moment everything changed on the night of January 31st. Here is a question that has been on everyone's mind since this case broke. Do you believe the person who organized this crime is someone Nancy actually knew personally, or do you think it was a stranger who targeted her? Drop your answer in the comments right now, because what Dr. Brucato revealed about that question will change how you see every detail of this case. 8 minutes after that signal dropped, at 2:36 in the morning, a Ring camera 2.5 miles away on a street called Camino Royal picked up a vehicle traveling south. Consistent with a Kia Soul. Heading toward the Mexican border, 60 miles away. That was the last electronic trace.
It comes a day after Savannah posted that heartbreaking video offering a $1 million reward for any information that leads to the recovery of her mother. In the 12 hours after, a senior law enforcement official says the FBI received more than 750 new tips. But experts say it's now about quality over quantity.
It is now May 2026. More than 100 days have passed. Nancy Guthrie has not been found. No confirmed location. No arrest. No charges. And the $1 million reward sitting unclaimed is not because people are not paying attention. It is because the person or persons responsible have been very, very careful. Until now. Because the FBI found a link. And Dr. Gary Brucato went inside the psychological architecture of the person that link points toward, detail by detail, layer by layer, with the kind of clinical precision that does not come from watching crime documentaries. It comes from decades of published research, from thousands of documented cases, from a career spent inside the most disturbing corners of human behavior. By the time this story is done, the way you see this case will never be the same. Dr. Gary Brucato is not a television personality. He is not someone who shows up on screen to fill airtime with speculation and dramatic pauses. When he speaks about a case, he brings something most commentators cannot offer. He brings the data. He brings the research. He brings decades of published work that has held up under peer review, under cross-examination, under the scrutiny of the most rigorous academic and legal standards in the country. He is a forensic psychologist and clinical researcher, a visiting scholar at Boston College, a member of the expert panel at the Cold Case Foundation. He is the co-author of a landmark book called The New Evil, a work that examines the emergence of modern violent crime with a level of psychological depth that changed how investigators approach certain categories of cases. He helped lead the development of the Columbia University Mass Murder Database, one of the most comprehensive research projects ever assembled to study the psychological profile of individuals who commit mass violence. This is the man who analyzed Brian Koberger before the arrest in the Idaho student murders. His profile matched. Detail by detail, it matched. When Dr. Brucato speaks, investigators listen. And what he said about Nancy Guthrie, what he said about the FBI's link, about the evidence sitting in the laboratory at Quantico right now, was not speculation. It was a framework. A forensic map drawn from thousands of documented cases pointing in one specific direction. Here is what the FBI found. Mixed DNA was recovered from Nancy Guthrie's home. Mixed DNA means genetic material from more than one individual was present at that scene. A hair sample was collected. A glove was recovered approximately 2 miles from the property. Both pieces of biological evidence were sent to the FBI laboratory in Quantico, Virginia for analysis. Separating clean individual profiles from mixed DNA samples is not a fast process. Dr. Brucato was direct about that. It can take up to a year. That timeline has frustrated people watching from the outside. But frustration and failure are not the same thing. The science is working. It is simply working at the speed the science requires. And then there is C.C. Moore. That name matters more than most people realize. C.E. Moore is the genetic genealogist who helped crack the Golden State Killer case after more than 40 years of silence. She has done it again and again across dozens of cold cases that law enforcement had given up on. Her method is specific. Once a clean DNA profile is established, it gets uploaded to genealogical databases where it is compared against voluntary submissions from relatives of potential suspects. From those comparisons, family trees are built. Those trees are narrowed. And eventually, a name emerges. Not a guess. A name supported by genetic science. C.E. Moore has been connected to the forensic analysis in Nancy Guthrie's case. That single fact is not a footnote. That is a turning point. Because when C.E. Moore gets involved, cases that looked impossible start moving. They always move. The question is never whether the science works. The question is how long the science takes.
Early on, without evidence, many internet sleuths deemed Dominic Evans, a local teacher and bandmate of Nancy's son-in-law, a suspect. Evans and his wife tonight speaking out to the New York Times, saying they've been scared numb, forced to hide out in their home. I feel like someone's taken my name. There are innocent people that get hurt.
Dr. Brucato placed that evidence inside the 92%. Between 76 and 92% of people who lose their lives to violence in the United States knew the person responsible in some capacity. The most recent and most comprehensive analyses of national data place that figure at 92. Not 50. Not 75. 92. And that number does not require a close personal relationship. It does not demand family connection or deep friendship. It includes a contractor who worked on the property once, a delivery driver who made regular stops, a service provider, someone from her church, someone from a store she visited every week for years. The connection could be brief. It could be passing. But statistically, it existed. And the FBI's link, the biological evidence now being processed at Quantico, is the thread that connects that statistic to a specific human being. Dr. Brucato said this investigation is not stalled. It is moving quietly, deliberately, in ways that do not show up in press conferences, because showing your hand too early in a case this complex is how you lose a conviction in court. The silence from investigators is not absence. It is strategy. Now comes the part of this story that most people have not fully processed. Because Dr. Brucato did not just analyze the evidence in Nancy Guthrie's case. He went inside. He went inside the psychological structure of the person the evidence points toward. And what he found there was not a monster wearing a mask. It was something far more unsettling than that. There were two people involved in what happened to Nancy Guthrie. Dr. Brucato was not ambiguous about this. The evidence, the planning, the execution, the staging, none of it reflects a single individual operating alone. There were two tiers. Two roles. Two entirely different psychological profiles working in the same direction for the same reason. The first is the person who appeared on the doorbell camera. Dr. Brucato called this person the waiter. Visible. Present. The face of the operation. But not the architect of it. Study that figure on the footage. Masked. Armed. Nitrile gloves. A small backpack. Standing at a doorbell camera in the early hours of the morning about to commit a serious crime and showing no visible signs of distress. No rapid movement. No shoulder checks. No hesitation. Just stillness. A calm that Dr. Brucato identified using a specific clinical term. A blunted fear response consistent with psychopathic character structure. Psychopathy is not a word that means what movies suggest it means. It is a documented constellation of personality traits. Reduced empathy. Reduced remorse. And critically, a neurological response to fear that simply does not function the way it does in most people. Situations that would produce overwhelming anxiety in an ordinary person do not trigger the same alarm in someone with genuine psychopathic traits. That is why this figure could stand in front of a camera, in the dark, preparing to do what they were about to do, and appear composed. But composed does not mean competent. The holster this person wore was positioned incorrectly, in a way that could actually be dangerous to themselves. The firearm visible in the footage did not match the holster, indicating someone carrying a weapon they were not genuinely familiar with. They brought foliage to the house. They used a plant from the porch to cover the camera rather than disabling or avoiding the system entirely before approaching. Dr. Brucato did not soften his words on this point. He called it a move that an absolute amateur would make. So here is the paradox at the center of this profile. This person was calm enough to stand at a camera without flinching, but also careless enough to make mistakes that a truly skilled criminal would never make. Composed but not intelligent. Comfortable with violence but not practiced in executing it cleanly. That combination is specific. It is documented. And it leaves a trail. People with psychopathic traits have a history. Not a hidden history. A visible one. Decades of behavior that others remember. Disproportionate reactions to small provocations. Explosive responses to perceived slights. The person who completely lost control in a parking lot over nothing. The individual who screamed at a cashier over less than $1. The one who held a grudge for years over something most people forgot in an afternoon. These are not private behaviors. They happen in public. They happen in front of witnesses. And those witnesses remember. Dr. Brucato said investigators should be actively speaking with community members in the Tucson area who have had what he called nasty run-ins with a grudge-holding, volatile individual. Because that behavioral signature, that specific pattern of disproportionate rage at minor offenses, is something that leaves a mark on the people who witnessed it. This person almost certainly has prior contact with law enforcement. Somewhere in the system, there are records. There is a paper trail that predates January 31st by years. That is the waiter. Now meet the chef. The chef is the person who never stood in front of a camera. The person who planned this. Who orchestrated it. Who gave the direction and ensured that someone else was the visible face of what happened. The chef is the reason the waiter showed up on that porch. And the chef is the reason nothing in that house was taken. Because the chef did not want objects. The chef wanted Nancy gone. Dr. Brucato has written extensively about a specific category of crime called elimination. You eliminate, through violence, a person you know because that person is standing between you and something you want. The motive can be financial. An inheritance. Assets that change hands upon someone's passing. Property. An estate. It can be about burden. A person whose care has become expensive or incompatible with the life someone else wants to live. It can be about knowledge. Someone who has seen too much. Someone who figured something out that cannot be allowed to remain known. The hallmark of elimination crimes is staging. The perpetrator works deliberately to make the scene appear as though a total stranger came in without motive and committed the act. They manufacture randomness. They construct a false narrative designed to redirect investigators away from anyone with a personal connection to the victim. Look at what was found at Nancy Guthrie's home. Nothing of value was removed. Not jewelry. Not electronics. Not cash. Items that any genuine intruder would have taken were left completely untouched. There was no biological evidence consistent with any motivation beyond taking Nancy herself. There was a staged blood trail. A strategically open back door. Elements designed to tell a story. A story that does not hold together when you apply 30 years of forensic research to it. The staging failed. Not because the chef was not smart, but because you cannot fake a motive you do not have. You can open a back door and call it an exit point. You cannot manufacture the signs of a robbery when you did not come to rob. You cannot create the evidence of a random intrusion when your entire reason for being there was deeply personal. Dr. Brucato said it directly. The gap between what this scene was supposed to look like and what it actually shows is the most important thing in this investigation. That gap points straight back to someone in Nancy Guthrie's personal world. Someone who appeared kind. Someone who appeared trustworthy. Someone Nancy herself had no documented reason to fear. The chef presents as prosocial. That is the clinical term Dr. Brucato used. Superficially warm. Apparently helpful. Someone who smiled at Nancy. Someone who was a presence in her life that felt safe. But beneath that surface was a financial reason to want her gone, and the willingness to act on it. That is who the FBI's link points toward. That is who the DNA, the hair, the glove, the genealogical database work is converging on. Go back to January 31st. Go back to the beginning of that night. Nancy had dinner at Annie and Tommaso's home. She ate. She visited. She said goodbye. Tommaso drove her home at 9:48 in the evening, walked her to the front door, and watched her go inside. There was nothing unusual. Nothing alarming. The night looked exactly like dozens of other Tuesday evenings in a quiet neighborhood in Tucson, Arizona. But someone already knew that. Someone already knew her routine. Already knew when she came home, when the house went dark, when she was most vulnerable. That knowledge does not come from surveillance conducted by a stranger over a few days. It comes from familiarity. It comes from proximity. It comes from having been inside that world close enough and long enough to understand exactly how Nancy Guthrie lived when no one was watching. At 1:47 in the morning, that knowledge became action. The figure on the doorbell camera did not arrive at random. They arrived at a specific time, at a specific address, with specific equipment, prepared for a specific outcome. The nitrile gloves were deliberate. The backpack was deliberate. The choice to cover the camera rather than approach from an angle that avoided it entirely was a mistake, but the preparation surrounding that mistake was not accidental. Someone put this plan together. Someone calculated the timing. Nancy's pacemaker spiked at 1:47. Her body registered what her camera was already recording. And in the 41 minutes that followed, between that cardiac spike and the moment the pacemaker signal went silent at 2:28 in the morning, something happened inside that house or connected to that house that determined everything that came next. Dr. Brucato was clear about what the evidence suggests regarding the staged scene. It is entirely possible, he said, that Nancy was not taken from there or harmed there. It is entirely possible that what investigators found at that property, the blood trail, the open back door, was constructed to tell a story that pointed away from the truth. The actual location of what happened may be somewhere else entirely. Somewhere that connects directly to the person who orchestrated this. Somewhere the chef felt in control. 8 minutes after the pacemaker went silent, at 2:36 in the morning, a Ring camera 2.5 miles away on Camino Royal captured a vehicle traveling south. Consistent with a Kia Soul. Moving toward the Mexican border 60 miles away. No arrest. No confirmed location. No proof of life. And yet Dr. Brucato said the word that the family of Nancy Guthrie needed more than any other word in this investigation. He said solved. Not might be solved. Not could be solved if everything goes right. Solved. His professional conclusion, based on the evidence pathways available, is that this case resolves. Not on a television timeline. Not in 42 minutes. But it resolves. Here is why. The DNA found at Nancy Guthrie's home is being processed at the FBI laboratory in Quantico. Mixed samples require meticulous separation before individual profiles can be established. That work can take up to a year. But once those profiles exist, they go into genealogical databases. And once they enter those databases, CECE Moore builds a family tree. She narrows it. She has done this before in cases that sat cold for decades. She did it with the Golden State Killer. She has done it dozens of times since. The science does not forget. The science does not get tired. And the science does not care how careful someone was on the night of January 31st. The hair sample is at Quantico. The glove found 2 miles from the property is at Quantico. Every piece of biological material recovered from that scene is being examined with tools that did not exist 20 years ago. One strand. One partial profile. One branch on a family tree. That is all it takes. The $1 million reward remains unclaimed. Dr. Brucato addressed that directly. He offered 3 documented possibilities. The first is that the accomplice, the waiter, is no longer alive. Removing a witness who holds dangerous knowledge is a documented pattern in crimes involving multiple tiers of participation. The fewer people who can talk, the safer the chef remains. The second possibility is that the waiter genuinely does not know who hired them. Compartmentalization in criminal operations is real. The person who executes an act does not always know the full identity of the person who ordered it. The third possibility is that the people with knowledge are within a closed circle that the reward has not yet reached. Not every person who knows something is watching the news. Not every person who holds a piece of this puzzle has seen that $1 million number attached to it. Any one of those possibilities represents a different investigative pathway. And Dr. Brucato said what every documented case with multiple participants eventually confirms. Once the first arrest happens, regardless of which tier that person represents, the rest of the truth tends to follow. One person sitting across from investigators, facing the weight of what comes next, changes the entire equation. Cooperation becomes the most rational choice available. And the chef, the person behind all of this, the person who appeared warm and trustworthy and present in Nancy's life, becomes exposed. Savannah Guthrie sits in that anchor chair on the Today Show every single morning. She does her job. She reads the news. She asks the questions. She holds the broadcast together the way professionals do when the alternative is falling apart on live television. And somewhere behind those eyes is a daughter who went to work every day for more than 100 days not knowing where her mother is. That is the weight this case carries beyond the statistics and the forensic timelines and the genealogical databases. Nancy Ellen Long Guthrie was born January 27, 1942. She raised 3 children. She outlived her husband. She built a quiet life in a neighborhood she stayed in for more than 50 years. She had dinner with her daughter on a Tuesday night and went home and walked through her front door, and that was the last ordinary moment she had. Her pacemaker is still there. Wherever Nancy is, that device is with her. It recorded the truth on the night of January 31st when everything changed. It time-stamped a cardiac spike at 1:47 in the morning and went silent at 2:28. That data exists. That record exists. And the people responsible for that silence underestimated something fundamental about what modern forensic science can do with the smallest trace of evidence left behind. The FBI found a link. Dr. Brucato built a profile around it that is more complete and more specific than anything that has been said publicly about this case. The genealogical analysis is running. The evidence is being processed. The chef is still out there, still presenting as normal, still wearing the face of someone Nancy would have recognized and trusted. But the net is closing. It always closes. And there is one detail that has not been discussed publicly yet. One piece of this case that investigators have kept close, deliberately, strategically, because releasing it at the wrong moment could compromise everything they have spent 100 days building. That detail, what it means, and who it connects to, is what this channel covers next. If you are not subscribed, do it right now. Turn on the bell. Because what comes next in the Nancy Guthrie case is not a recap. It is the piece of this story that finally starts to answer the question everyone has been asking since February 1st. Who is the chef? And how close are they to being found?